Hi everyone, and welcome, and thanks for taking the time today to join me. As you've heard, my name is Jennifer McMillan, and I'm a mechanical engineer with ASCENT'S, and my job title is actually officially an Instructional Design Project Manager. And basically what this means is that I work with all of our AOTG training materials for Autodesk material, and what I do is I manage all the timelines and all the priorities in getting all of that material all updated every year. Personally, myself, I'm a subject matter expert as well for the manufacturing line of products. So Inventor is one of my products that I work on. I also work on Navisworks, our showcase title, as well as Plant 3D. So just to give you kind of a highlight of how the structure of this webcast today, I'm going to be doing PowerPoint presentation like you're seeing on the screen right now. And I'm going to follow up that with doing some actual demonstrations directly in Inventor 2014. So to get started, what I wanted to just explain is that this presentation is going to be pulled directly from our Autodesk Inventor 2014 Advanced Assembly Modeling class. So I've taken Chapter 9, which is in that book, called Model Simplification, and we're going to talk about that today. With that, there are two topics that we're going to cover, Shrinkwrap and Model Simplification. For those of you that are maybe not working right now with Autodesk Inventor 2014 and are working still with 2013, the Model Simplification tool that I'll be talking about today is actually something new in 2014. So it's something you can look forward to seeing once you do your upgrade. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you a quick, why do we simplify? So some of the reasons why customers use the simplification tool. So right off the top, it's large assembly management. So if you're working, I'm sure many of you have worked in very large assemblies, you start to see the performance of your models starting to slow down with your computer when the resources start getting really heavy. So simplifying models and portions of a model that maybe the design is already complete allows you to then help increase the performance of your system. Additionally, sometimes you're receiving incoming vendor models. So let's say you're purchasing a portion of your design. The vendor may provide you with a placeholder geometry where you're basically bringing in a simplified model that you're going to be purchasing. You don't need to have all the details of it, but you can get an idea and put it into your assembly. And the same holds going out. So if you're actually selling data or models out to customers and selling all of your stuff, you might want to send models to them. And again, you want that to be a lighter weight model. You don't want to give away all the proprietary design information, so you can simplify the model so that you're giving people what they want, but not giving away everything. So that's kind of the high level why we simplify. So to get into it, I'm going to start directly with the first topic being Shrinkwrap. So this is one of the functionalities that's available within Inventor. And I mentioned the other one is 2014. This is one that's been available in the software for quite some time. So starting with Shrinkwrap, the objective in talking about this is I want to teach you about how to create a Shrinkwrap model that is a simplification of the original component. So pretty straightforward. How do we create our Shrinkwrap part? So with that, you simply open an assembly file. So all Shrinkwraps are created directly from an assembly file. And once open, you can select the Shrinkwrap command, so a simple command that you execute. And from there, it generates the Shrinkwrap file. Now that file is a part file. So you basically are taking the information that's in an assembly file and bringing it down to a part level. So it's merging all of the parts and all of the data into one part. So it's really simplifying it and lightening up that model. Now that model can be, once you start to get into the Shrinkwrap, the commands and the options, you can make that a solid body, or you can also make that a surface body. So once I get into my presentation and within Inventor, I can show you a little bit about the differences there. And in terms of each of those, you can see I've got three models on my screen. On the left-hand model, I have a picture of a mechanical pencil. I've sectioned it so you can see that there are a lot of internal components in there. The model in the center here that I have pointed out is one that has been shrink wrapped. So this is a shrink wrap model, and you can see that it's solid. So all of the internal components that were in that original assembly have now been stripped out, and the whole model has been made a solid. And the final one is a surface model. So instead of making it solid, it's just maintaining all of the external surfaces. Okay, so the shrink wrap model basically is only capturing the external surfaces of the model. Going back to the uses of shrink wrap, I mentioned large assembly management, incoming vendor models, outgoing models. All of those reasons are reasons why you would use shrink wrap. In terms of then creating a shrink wrap part, I mentioned that you need to have your assembly open, and once that assembly was opened, you can go in and you select the Assemble tab, so it's the very first tab in your assembly, and then you want to expand the Component pull-down menu. So the component panel down here, then you would select Shrink Wrap. And once that's executed, it brings up the Create Shrink Wrap Parts dialog box. And this is basically where you define the part name, the template that you're going to use, where you're going to store it, as well as the bill of materials structure. So then you would select OK, and your shrink wrap part gets created. So the part's created. However, how you're going to define the geometry in that shrink wrap part is defined on the next dialog box that becomes available, and this is called the Assembly Shrink Wrap option. So you can see this is a really big dialog box that becomes available, and it's simply that you work from top down. So you work from the style area, defining the style of it. You define your simplification, so how we're going to simplify the model to get it down to what you want to show. Hole patching, you can patch up some holes, as well as some other options at the bottom here. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to sit and describe them here at this point. I want to explain them once I actually get into software and you can see how these work. So once you define all those options, it's as simple as clicking OK, and you would generate your simplified, your shrink wrap part. So now I want to jump over into Inventor. Before I do so, I just wanted to explain that I mentioned I'm teaching this directly from the Chapter 9 in our Advanced Assembly course, and the demonstration I'm going to be doing is actually one of the exercises that in a traditional in-class training session, the students would be doing on their own. So in the training guide, there's an actual step-by-step description of what you want to do, all the steps that you're going to cover. So the goal in this exercise is taking that mechanical pencil that I have on the left-hand image and creating two shrink wrap parts, one being a solid and one being a surface model. So here I am in Inventor. I'm going to open up my Inventor mechanical pencil assembly. And you can see I have it here. And just to show you that I am in the actual assembly and that it has components on the inside, I'm going to quickly section it. So just like the pictures I was showing you, you can see here that I have the assembly and it has all of the components that are available inside. So I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to go straight into creating my first shrink wrap part. So I mentioned it's on the Assemble tab. I would expand out the component panel, and the shrink wrap option is right at the bottom here. So I'm going to select shrink wrap. So in this dialog box that comes up, it actually is really nice because it predefines the name for you. So it takes the actual name of the assembly that you're starting with, and it underscores, it appends underscore shrink wrap number 1. Okay, so I'm going to leave that default. I'm also going to leave my default template, and you can see also it defaults to the directory where the mechanical pencil was opened. So I'm going to select OK. So the part file is created, yet it doesn't know what geometry I'm going to include or show in my shrink wrap. So I get this dialog box that comes up next. So I mentioned you start at the top of the dialog box. This is the style. So this is defining what the geometry, the final geometry is going to look like. The options on the left-hand side, there's 2 of them that represent solid bodies being a single solid body. So we have a single solid body that merges out the seams between planar faces, And then the second one is one that does the same thing. It creates a single solid body. However, it maintains the seams. So again, it's just the look of how it's dealing with the seams on planar faces. The third option is one where it actually creates multi-body. So it would create an individual body for every component that exists in that original assembly. So it would create one for the handle, the shaft, the clip, the end piece, all of those things. So it creates a single body for each one of those. And this final one is the surface option. So it would create a single surface feature when it creates the shrink wrap. So those are the styles. And that's, I would say, one of the biggest definitions that you want to make sure you're capturing the design intent of that shrink wrap model. I'm going to create a single body using the second option. And then the next area is simplification. So the only simplification that you can do with shrink wrap is to define the visibility and the size requirements. So you can define which components you want to include based on visibility or size. So to start with the top one, you could enable this option, and it's normally always enabled by default in a standard installation. And what this means is it removes any geometry that is 0% visible. So that means that anything inside that you cannot see inside the part, based on any view that you're looking at and you're rotating around, it would remove those components. Okay, so in the example of this pencil, anything that was on the internal workings of that pencil, because you can't see any of those from the outside view, they would be removed. So you could then manipulate that percentage to maybe like 2%. Something that might be 2% visible would also be removed. I find myself that many people don't really use this option as much. It's left at 0%, meaning anything not visible will not be seen. However, the second option is something that does get used more often. Basically, this is removing parts by size. So a good example of where this is really applicable would be if you had a very large assembly, and that large assembly had lots of nuts, bolts, rivets, those types of things that you really don't want to pass on to a shrink wrap model. You could actually enter a size ratio. So you could say that anything that's 3% of the overall size of the assembly will be removed from the shrink wrap model. So those are the only two options that you can use for removal of any information in the final design. Hole patching, really self-explanatory. It fills any holes. So it prevents you from having to go in and do work on the shrink wrap model to patch up holes and that type of thing. So again, that defaults to all, and all the holes would be patched. You can also set a range if you wanted to, and enter a minimum parameter or a maximum parameter to define specifically what holes you want to fill. The next area is including other objects. So not geometry objects, but supporting objects like work geometry or sketches. So you can enable or disable these options if you want to pass those on to the shrink wrap model. In addition to that, and these are off by default, imates and parameters. And if you're just passing it on to somebody that just wants to look at the overall look and the feel, use it as a placeholder, you know, information like imates and parameters, you don't need to pass that on. And in fact, passing them on might actually make the model a little bit more heavier. So you want to make sure that you disable those options. And the last of these options, these last four, are kind of miscellaneous, but very valuable as well. The first one is pretty self-explanatory, break link. This enables you to enable or disable the associativity with the source geometry. So let's say I make a change in my source pencil, whether or not that change gets communicated to my shrink wrap. The second one is reduced memory mode. So again, the whole purpose of simplifying is lightening your model to help with large assembly management. And this enables you to reduce it as much as possible when you're creating multi-body parts. When you're creating a multiple body part, because it are multiple body shrink wrap. So it's not storing all of the information in the model browser. So it just lightens it up a little bit more. And this create independent bodies. This is only available when you're creating single body, so these first two style options. It's only available here, and it's available to select so that if there was a failure during creation of the shrink-wrap model, because maybe two features or two parts in your assembly aren't actually touching, and it fails on the creation, it would then instead flip it over to create a multi-body part automatically without a failure occurring. So this is a nice time saver. If you had maybe a really large assembly, you could enable that to then automatically switch from single body to multi-body. And the last one is removing all internal voids. And this is something if you use a shell feature and the feature has a shell included, it would then fill the void created by the shell. So at this point I'm going to create OK, and you can see here that a second model, you can see my tab at the bottom has been activated, and I now got my shrink wrap part created. If I go into my view, I can section it. And you can see here that it's a solid. I'm going to change my lights here a little bit. Yeah, there, makes it a little bit easier to see that it is a solid. So there's that. So now I'm going to flip back again to my other top level assembly, and I'm going to create another shrink wrap. And this time I'm going to create it as a surface. So I'm going to keep all the defaults again, create it as a surface. I'm going to keep all my other options set. Click OK. Great. And again, now I'm going to section it to show you that it's created like as a surface. You can see here the surface model. Okay, so those are the two shrink wrap models. I'm going to create one third one because I'd like to show you the multi-body and how that differs in the model browser. So in the first pencil that I created, you can see that it created a single body. And when I roll my mouse over, it highlights the whole pencil assembly as a one single body. So when you create my shrink wrap again, I'm just going to keep accepting all the defaults, switch it over to the style of multi-body. So you can see I've got the third icon selected. I'm also going to break the link here. So I want to show you how I can break the associativity. And select OK. And that was created now as a multi-body. So if I expand out my solid bodies, you can see that all of the parts are individual bodies. So if you work in a design environment where you're using multi-body part design, this might be what you want to have provided with to you if you're being given a shrink wrap model. So I'm just going to flip back over into the assembly, and now I'm just going to make a quick change to the clip. So right now it's 35 in length. I'm going to switch that out to 45, update my model. You can see that it got a little longer there. If I flip over to now all of these shrink wrap models that I created, keep an eye on the clip here, and I can update. You can see that in the quick access toolbar, my local update is available. I can update it, and you can see that the clip has now updated. So the associativity has been maintained. The same thing in my surface model. I can pick my update. And the clip has also enlarged, so it's recognized the change. Now this final one, this was the multi-body that I disabled the associativity. You can see in the quick access that that update is not available. So the link between the two has been killed. There's no associativity at all. So just to summarize quickly in terms of simplifying using the shrink wrap tool, there's no way, unfortunately, that you can pick and choose components that you want to include or exclude. The only way to do it is with those visibility and size percentage settings that you do. One little workaround that you can do is prior to creating your shrink wrap feature, so prior to creating that, selecting that command, you could suppress or change the visibility of any component in the assembly in the, before you execute the command. And then that whatever's visible in the screen will be created in the shrink wrap. So that is one little workaround to removing specific components instead of trying to figure out all those percentages of visibility and percentages of size. So I am just going to flip back over into the presentation and continue on now into the second area. So Corinne mentioned questions. If you have any questions dealing with shrink wrap, please enter them in the chat area, and we'll deal with that at the end of the call. So model simplification. I mentioned this is new in 2014, and you know, from what I've been hearing from a lot of my customers, they're loving this new functionality. It's really provided some enhancement to simplification. So hope that you like what you see. In terms of the goals of this section, it's a little bit deeper. I'm going to explain how to selectively determine which assembly components to include in a simplified view, and then how to use that information to create a simplified part. We're also going to define bounding boxes and cylindrical geometry to represent assembly geometry. So this is called envelopes. We're going to do that. And then also use envelopes to create simplified views. And then in addition, we will combine the two of them. So being able to create, selectively define your design view or your simplified view, and use your envelopes to then create your simplified part. So all of this information is on a brand new tab that has been added adjacent to the Assemble tab. You can see in 2014, I've got a little screen grab in the top corner here, and you can see the Simplify tab is available here. And on that are the 3 commands that I just mentioned in my goals, including components, defining your envelope, and then creating that simplified part. So simplified tools, this is an alternative to Shrinkwrap. So this may fit what you want to do, but Shrinkwrap does some things well, as does model simplification. So you can balance the two of them, decide what your design intent is. Again, similar to Shrinkwrap, it's available for assembly. So it's done in the assembly level and enables you to create a simple view, envelopes, as well as a simplified part. So we're going to start with the very first command, which is including components. And unlike Shrinkwrap, where we can define which components to include, this is exactly what this command is doing. You can actually go in and pick and choose which components you want to include in your simple view. You can see in my little image here at the bottom, I have a blower assembly with a number of different components, and then the image on the right basically shows a simple view of that assembly where some components have been included. This is all done using the mini toolbar, so it's no longer a dialog box for this command. It's a simple mini toolbar, and there's a number of different commands that you can see here. And once I get into showing you this in Inventor, this will all make a little more sense, so I'll explain that once we get into the demonstration. And once that simple view has been defined, so you've picked and you choose which components to include, it is generated a simple view in your model browser. So you can see in the right-hand image here, I have a simple view that's been created, and that's stored within the representations node in the browser. The next command that I wanted to talk about is the second one on that Simplify tab, and it's called envelopes. And this is where you are able to select a component and then replace that component with some type of geometry. So it would be, in this case, what's available is a box or a cylinder. So you're simply replacing one component with a simple version that is just going to show you the space claim of that component. Once you get into this command, you're selecting which components to replace. You're replacing it with a box, with a cylinder. You can also define what whether or not that original component is maintained. So you can replace it with the box and then clear out the actual component. So with this icon here, you would hide it. As well, you can change the bounding shape to resize the size of the envelope, so a little flexibility there. And finally, once created, it's all stored as an assembly feature. So over in the model browser on the right-hand side here, you can see that this envelope has been created. It exists in my assembly, and it's at the assembly level. So it's an assembly level feature. And finally, the last command is the create simplified part command. And this enables you to create a part that consists of the simple view that we created, any of the envelopes that were created. In addition, it also takes into account any visibility and suppression that has been set on any of the components. So it's a simple way then to select, create the part, and it creates the simplified model for you. And you can see this is the dialog box that is available. And much like Shrinkwrap, it provides 3 icons or 3 styles of simplified parts. So these icons are, again, single body and multi-body. So you'll notice that there's no surface here. So this is one limitation of the simplification, is it does not create a surface model. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here is flip to my software demonstration. And again, this is an exercise that would be provided in the training guide that students would work through to practice their knowledge of the simplification tool. So here I'm working with the blower assembly. I have all of the components together. On the left-hand side, you can see there's a number of different components in the assembly. And on the right-hand side, I have created the model with all of the components excluded, and then I've also created the envelopes. So that's what our goal is in this exercise. So now that I've got Inventor open, I'm going to change over into my other directory and open up the assembly. Now that I have the assembly open, I can show you that all of these commands that I've been talking about with this new 2014 functionality is in the Simplify tab, so it's adjacent to the Assemble tab, and you can see the 3 commands here. So I'm going to start by creating my simple view using the Include Components command. I'm going to move my, my mini toolbar over a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. And right at the very top of this mini toolbar, there's a little drop down. And basically what this is doing is it enables you to refine what you're looking at. Because I'm creating this as a very first simple view, all of my components are showing. So this is, I'm using the View All command. If I was to go back in and redefine this, generally you could use some of these other commands where it would allow you to then see what's already being included or view what has been excluded already. If I was to go to View Excluded right now, everything is shown because it's brand new. I haven't actually excluded everything yet. So it's just some flexibility in terms of how you select your components. I'm going to work with the View All type, and you can see that I now am selecting to include components in my simple view. I'm going to go over to the model browser, and I'm going to select a couple components. You can see that I can select them directly in the model browser. I can also select directly in the model. So here I've got 3 components selected that I'm going to include in my simple view. The other options that are available in this mini toolbar are available in this 3rd area here. And what they do is they deal with selection priority. So I'm just selecting part level features, so I'm just going to actually keep the first one. But there's a couple other ways that you can help to efficiently select your components by selecting components only or parent priority. And then on the right-hand side, this is all occurrences. And this is not that handy for me right now in the model that I'm in, but it is something that many people use. For instance, if we look back at that model that I explained earlier where you have a big design with lots of rivets and lots of bolts and nuts, they all are the same part all the way through. If you included all occurrences, then all you have to do is select one of the instances, and all of them are also included in or removed from the simple view. So now that I've selected my components, I can select OK. and create my simple view. If you look over in the model browser, you can see under the representations node, I now have a new simple view created. I could then switch back to my default, which is got everything shown, or I can go back into my simple view. So it's just like design views, you can flip back and forth. Now what I want to do is use my second command, and I'm going to create an envelope. So again, the mini toolbar is available. You can see by default it's selecting the bounding box, but I could pull it down and select the cylinder if I want it. What it does is it maintains what was used the last time. So if I maintain a box this time, the next time I execute the command, it will also be a box. So I'm going to select my, my mount, and you can see that the component is immediately previewed with a bounding box surrounding it. So much like creating the actual simple view, you have your priority and your occurrences. You also have this other option here, this show original or hide original. And what this enables you to do is to determine whether you want to include the component with the envelope, so have both of them maintained in the model. Because I'm trying to just create a lightweight placeholder model, I'm going to hide that original geometry and leave that as its default. You can also assign any kind of material to the placeholder. I'm going to leave the default, and I'm just going to select OK. And you can see that my envelope's created. So I've got a box, placeholder envelope that's been created. And you can see over in the model browser that I have the envelope created as an assembly level feature. Now I'm going to create a second envelope, but before I do that, I remember in the actual full assembly that the full extent of the width of this back blower actually wasn't limited. It was a little bit larger, so it wasn't just on the extent of the band. So I'm going to go in and actually make an edit here. So I'm going to go in and edit the included components, and this is where I can show you a little bit more about these other options. So view included. So I'm going to choose to view what's already been included, and you can see that only those 3 have been included. View what's been excluded, and you can see everything else. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select to include a couple other components. And this is just going to help me define the full shape and size of that blower. And select OK. So now you can see my simple view has been updated and includes all those components. I'm going to define my envelope, and I'm going to select the band at the back, and you can see that the band is replaced and previewed with the bounding box. Now, I actually want to make a modification here because I can actually only select one component to be replaced with an envelope at a time. You can't select multiple components to be replaced by one envelope. So what I'm going to do instead, to be a little tricky, is I added those other components, and I'm going to drag the size of my envelope to actually cover the outside extent of the model. So you can see that I did it in one view. I'm going to flip my view over using the view cube in the top corner, and I'm going to drag this down as well. Okay? You can see here that I also have a little entry field here. I could enter a value if I wanted to, so I could have, if I wanted it in an exact size, I could have done a measurement in my model and then entered a size in there as well. So now returning back to my home view, you can see that I have created a second envelope, and it exists now in the model browser as well. The final one that I'm going to create is actually going to be a cylindrical bounding box or cylindrical envelope, and I'm going to replace the motor here. So you can see that I've done that. I'm going to flip over into my top view, and this time I'm just going to drag it down a little bit this way. I'm not going to just to adjust it a little bit, and I can create it. So now I have 3 envelopes in my assembly and my simple view. So I've used the first 2 commands on that Simplify tab. So I mentioned there are assembly level features. So they're always going to exist in the model unless they're suppressed. So what I'm going to do just to show you is I can take this end of features marker and drag it back up to the top here. So you can see that now my envelope 1, 2, and 3 have all been suppressed. And you can see that my simple view right now still has all of those framing components that I redefined and added to my to my simple view. I don't actually want those in there. They were done more. I added them simply to get me my size constraints for my envelope. So now I'm going to go in and actually remove these again. So I'm going to edit it again. So at this point, I'm going to go in and change my selection priority here to View Included. Now, you're probably wondering why the other 3 components aren't included. If you remember, when I created those 3 envelopes, I asked it to hide the original components. So that's what it's done. Those envelopes replace those components. And they're not showing right now simply because I have those assembly features suppressed. So I'm going to select to exclude. So I've excluded them all. I'm not seeing anything right now simply because I have those envelopes suppressed. I'm going to select OK, and I'm going to drag that end of features back so I can see those envelopes again, so you can see all 3 of them. So it makes it a little bit easier to see. And then the third window here is, sorry, the third command in my ribbon is Create Simplified Parts. So I have customized my simple view to show only those 3 components. I then created my envelope, which in fact hid those components when I created them. And now I'm going to create my simplified part as a combination of those 2. So you can see here I mentioned the different styles that are available. They're all the same as Shrinkwrap except for the missing surface option. There's no surface available. I'm going to create a single body that maintains seams here. One thing that's just a little tricky here, and I'll just mention, is doesn't actually append any information here. So unlike Shrinkwrap that appended to the name, you actually have to go in and type something in if you wanted to have another name other than what the assembly was. And then the same thing holds. It doesn't maintain the directory from which you opened the assembly. So you also want to verify that you're actually using the right directory. And then I can select OK. And you can see that my model opens. What's really nice here is that this is all geometry, and I can go in and actually even add features to it. So I could go in and add a chamfer to this area to actually refine and define the space claim even just a little bit better. And then I have this model that I can save and send to anybody. Before I just go on, actually, I just wanted to highlight that if you look over in the model browser, each of those envelopes were generated as an extrusion. So you can see extrusion 1, extrusion 2, and extrusion 3. And that's the reason why then I was adding the chamfer to that extrusion 1. Okay, and then I mentioned that I created it as a single body, so you can see it's all one single body. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you in terms of the demonstration. Now I just wanted to do a quick comparison. So I've talked to you about Shrinkwrap. I've talked to you about simplification tools. Let's just do a quick high-level review. So Shrinkwrap, you cannot individually select components for inclusion. You can remove parts by size visibility percentage, which is definitely really great for in some situations, but it might involve a little bit of work to understand what that percentage is that you need, a little bit of trial and error. Or you can then set the visibility or suppression state of components prior to shrink wrapping. Shrinkwrap preserves all of the external surfaces and removes all of the internal data. So you remember that the pencil, it kept all of the external and then removed all of the internal workings of the mechanical pencil. You can define whether or not you want to fill the holes. So yes, no, percentage of hole size that you want to fill, that type of thing. Also, it can create a surface or a solid. And then also the ability to control whether or not an associative link is maintained. So yes, you can turn it on and maintain that link, or you can disable that and break it specifically. In terms of the simplification, so you had those 3 commands, the ability then to include or exclude geometry in your assembly or parts in your assembly. And then you could also create your envelopes to replace some of those parts. You end up with a single part that preserves either the geometry, so it's creating a simplified part of the geometry, or if envelopes exist, it's replacing that geometry with your bounding cylinder or your bounding box, whichever geometry that is. It will not fill holes, so once you create that geometry, if there are holes that exist, you would have to go in and use surfacing tools to actually fill those holes using standard modeling techniques. And then this tool only creates your simple model as a solid. And the other thing I didn't actually really highlight there is that there is no associative link with the simplified model. So when you create that model, it is completely separate from the original assembly. Any changes made to it will not transfer over into the simplified model. And that also saying that I should mention I'm going to actually flip just back over into Inventor and go back into my blower assembly. Any of these envelopes, they exist, these assembly levels. It's always good practice at this point that once you create that simplified view, it's no longer associative. It's not staying with the model. You're not having any associativity. You could delete all of those envelopes and remove them from the model. Reason being is then if you were to go in and create a second simplified view, those envelopes still stay in the model. So they're going to pass on to another simplified part if you were to use it. So definitely look at deleting any of those assembly envelopes once you've created your simplified view. Okay. So just quickly reviewing just a little bit about what ASCENT'S AOTG training material is. So I mentioned I taught this section as one of our chapters right from our book. Just a couple things and highlights that we have and are available with our books is many of you have heard about Inventor certification or certification with Revit or Civil. What we offer is in our books, at the back in the appendix, the exam topic and exam objectives are all listed, and we have reference then to where that material is covered in our training guide. So it really gives a nice idea and a quick reference to where you can go and look for that information. And then once you actually go into that chapter, you have a little note at the beginning of the topic that says, yes, this is a certification topic. It pertains to advanced modeling, create a multi-body part. So that's just a little extra help that shows you that this is a certification topic. At the end of each of our chapters, we have review questions. So if you're an instructor and teaching a class, you can definitely go and ask your students these questions. If you're a self-paced learner, just purchasing the book, same thing holds. You can use that material to review. All of the answers are available in the instructor tools. So there's an instructor tools that gets published as well with our standard training guides, and that gives all the answers. It also gives a nice breakdown of when teaching a class, a suggested time for teaching each of the chapters. So lecture, how long, exercise, how long the student should be working with it. And in addition to that, there are instructor slides. So much like the presentation I just presented, there are slides that support the teaching of that material. And all of our material is labeled under the AOTG branding, so this is a really exciting title that Autodesk has given us. We're the only providers of Autodesk official training material. I mentioned I work with the mechanical and the manufacturing lineup, so these are some of our manufacturing titles just to do a quick list here. AutoCAD Electrical, AutoCAD Mechanical, all of the Inventor titles. Mold flow as well as simulation. So these are all the titles that we have available in the manufacturing lineup. All of these are available right now. The one that's still just hanging on is tube and pipe, and that one will actually be available. We're aiming by the end of next week or very early next week, so that will be available as well. So at this point then all of the 2014 will be available for you. So at that point I'm just going to hand you over to Corrine.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so all of the courseware that Jennifer just talked about there is available in both a pre-printed format that we call a student guide. There's an image there of it on the left of your screen. We also have them available in an electronic ebook format. And we do have these books available in both imperial and metric units of measurement. And all of our courseware offerings are available on our secure online e-store. So that first link there, ASCENT'sestore.com. You can go on there to make any purchases directly yourself. If you've never logged in there before, you can just log in as a guest if you want, or you can set up an account. It's pretty easy to go through there and find what you're looking for. Or if you prefer and you're more familiar with our website, please do go to our website. It's ASCENTED.com, ASCENTED.com. And from there you can also purchase the books. There's links right to the e-store. But you can also see what the page count is, what the pricing is, the table of contents, and also download a sample chapter. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out that we do have a blog which you can access directly from the Ascent website. And Jennifer is one of our bloggers, so I do encourage you to look her up and follow her for any Inventor courseware updates.